least some of the economic consequences of climate-driven catastrophes. With Lagarde on the phone, Motley made her pitch. Barbados, she said, was going to default on the debt it owed to private banks and investors. She wanted Lagarde's support in persuading them to negotiate its terms. The IMF is both the assessor and the enforcer of global economic policy, the de facto gatekeeper to the world's capital markets. Motley knew that banks and investors would work with her only if Barbados was participating in a formal IMF program for economic reform, and it had to start immediately. Motley told Lagarde that Barbados was prepared to do voluntarily what most countries have to be coerced to do, cut its budget and raise taxes. But she needed something in return. With the effects of climate change bearing down on the region, the kind of austerity the IMF demanded from developing nations, slashing the size of government agencies and firing thousands of public employees while auctioning off real estate and other national assets, would no longer work. Motley wanted Lagarde to endorse an economic program that would still allow her to raise salaries of civil servants, build schools, and improve piping and wiring for water and power. Before you carry people on a long journey, she told Lagarde, you have to give them a little breakfast. Barbados, while considered relatively wealthy by the World Bank standards, hadn't been able to borrow on the international market since 2013, and it had no capacity to pay for essential programs and projects. The concern was immediate, Motley explained. Hurricane season was about to begin, and the room fell quiet. No one was sure how Lagarde would respond. Would she trust Motley to spend on Barbados first, or demand, as the IMF usually did, deference to debtors? Then, as Motley's advisors recall, came the director's surprising reply. She was extremely supportive of what Motley was proposing. The next day, Motley declared that Barbados would stop making its payment on the nation's debts. Today, my friends, we pry off the hands that have been strangling us, she said. Some of the business leaders that she had gathered to stand behind her at the lectern winched. The value of Barbados's bonds on the global markets crashed. S&P Global downgraded the island's credit. The country teetered on the edge of financial chaos. With that, Motley's adventure onto the global stage of financial and climate change activism began. What Motley sought was not to be easy. She would have to untangle the relationships connecting the IMF with the financial institutions that invest in countries like Barbados, a global financial system that simultaneously helps and preys upon countries at their moments of greatest need. She would have to challenge the rules of that system and its powerful figures, who often struggle to recognize how climate change is altering the traditional dynamics of debt development. Motley would come to see the traps of that system as fundamentally unjust, born from generations of colonial rule. Just as outsiders once pillaged the Caribbean for wealth created by the hands of slaves, investors in those former imperial powers now squeeze former territories for their assets, for access to markets, and for interest on loans. As she will have to contend with all that's waiting for the next storm, knowing she governed a dot of land isolated in one of the most vulnerable places on earth. I will say this, and I know you will agree. Mom dug a hole so deep for herself that she needed all the financial rope she could find, even if that meant making compromises. There's a saying, when you pray for rain, you have to deal with the mud too. Avinash Prasad is the yin to Mom's yang. I know more about him, and I've heard more from him than any of the 30 court jesters that warm the benches of Parliament and are paid handsomely to do so. What did Kanye West say? Feeling like my life froze? I'm about to hit the ground. I sold my soul to the devil. That's a crappy deal. At least it came with a few toys like a Happy Meal. This game you would never win.